For over 40 years, Rob Reiner dodged one question like his career depended on it.
We were going to war again based on a lie. And it was just very, very disturbing. And there's a line in the film where James Marsden, who plays Warren Strobel, he says, it feels like you feel like your child is running into the street.
Every time someone brought up All in the Family, he'd go on about the genius writing, the impact, the cultural weight, but he never dared to dive into one name, Carroll O'Connor. On screen, they clashed like fire and gasoline, locked in those living room showdowns that mirrored America's biggest divides. But off-screen, the silence was deafening. And that silence turned into years of whispers, rumors about bruised egos, resentment, and tension that never healed. Before O'Connor passed, nobody got the full truth. But now, Reiner finally breaks his silence, and what he admits flips the story upside down. Everything people thought they knew about Archie Bunker's world and the man who played his liberal nemesis suddenly looks very different. Their first clash? It wasn't gentle at all. When Rob Reiner joined All in the Family in 1971, he caught on quick. This wasn't some cozy sitcom set filled with laughs and hugs. It was a battleground. The whole show was designed to spark arguments and hit nerves, and his character, Michael Meathead Stivic, was written as a full-on counterattack against Archie Bunker, Carroll O'Connor's gruff conservative patriarch. Every line Mike threw was meant to jab, to challenge, to expose. But O'Connor wasn't just acting angry, he was angry.
Norman Lear was the first person that got me. I mean, I was playing jacks with his daughter. Norman says to my dad, you know, this kid is really funny. My dad said, what, that kid? That kid, he's a sullen. He sits quiet. He doesn't, he's not funny.
Behind the scenes, he battled Norman Lear tooth and nail over the show's scripts and tone. He refused to let Archie turn into a joke. If Archie gets laughs without consequence, he warned, he becomes dangerous. That raw creative tension, it bled right into the performances, and when Reiner walked on that set, he stepped straight into the storm. Carroll O'Connor didn't welcome Rob Reiner with warmth or reassurance. He signed him up like a rival from day one. During rehearsals, O'Connor would switch things up without warning, changing his timing, stretching out silences that weren't in the script, and throwing lines with sudden force that hit like punches. He wanted Reiner off balance, reacting in real time, not just playing a part. The arguments you saw on screen, they felt real because O'Connor made them real. He'd throw insults with such fiery conviction that Reiner later admitted he sometimes wondered if the rage ended when the cameras did. But the real lessons came after the takes. O'Connor never raised his voice off camera. He didn't need to. He'd pull Reiner aside and say, calm but sharp, if you don't believe what you're saying, the audience will know before the laugh track does. That line stuck like a scar. From that moment, their dynamic turned into something far more complex. O'Connor wasn't looking for a student. He wanted an equal, someone who could go toe-to-toe with Archie Bunker's lifelong presence. Reiner quickly learned that surviving on that set didn't mean avoiding O'Connor's challenges. It meant matching them. Every scene became a duel, every look a test of conviction. By the time All in the Family hit its 8th season, though, something had shifted. The old magic had started to fade. The only explosive battles between Archie and Mike had become automatic. Archie barked the usual slurs, Mike countered with moral certainty, and the audience laughed on cue. Even Reiner confessed later that it all felt repetitive, just noise without movement. But then, one particular episode came along, and everything changed.
America being the last remaining superpower, what would they do with this power in terms of spreading democracy? And they had talked about going into Iraq in the Middle East and figuring out a way to put a Western-style democracy in the Middle East. Hopefully it would proliferate and then, help Israel and spread democracy.
Two's a crowd looked simple on paper, a quick fix to save time and cash. Just trap two characters in one small room, let the tension do the work, and call it a day. Archie and Mike end up locked overnight in the storeroom of Archie's bar, One bottle of liquor between them, no way out. What started as another round of loud back and forth slowly twisted into something raw and unexpected. What most viewers never realized is that the emotional core of that episode wasn't even in the script. Carroll O'Connor had been waiting years for that exact moment. He'd been building Archie's private world piece by piece, holding it close, waiting for the right time to show what was really going on beneath all that bluster. He knew that if he revealed too much too soon, he'd lose his edge. Then came the line that cracked the shell. Mike asked, "I don't understand how you get to feel this way about people." O'Connor knew that was it, the opening he'd been waiting for. Instead of dodging, Archie spoke straight for the first time. He talked about his father, not with anger, but with loyalty. He remembered beatings as discipline, punishment as tough love, and confinement as a lesson meant to make him strong. In Archie's mind, cruelty and love were tangled up until he couldn't tell one from the other. He explained that the man who taught him to play ball, who walked him to school hand in hand, couldn't have been wrong about the world. If his father believed certain people were dangerous, then Archie accepted it as truth. To him, letting go of those beliefs meant betraying the love he'd built his life around. Later, O'Connor described that heartbreaking confession with brutal clarity. The poison got into the system. It was passed on. It was Archie's heritage. He made sure people knew this wasn't an excuse for hate. It was the painful anatomy of how prejudice gets born and passed down. It wasn't just a scene, it was a diagnosis. And Rob Reiner caught it the instant it happened. Instead of firing back with politics or moral speeches, he switched gears completely. Mike stopped trying to win the argument. He listened. He let silence do the talking. And when Archie finally passed out drunk, Mike quietly covered him with a blanket. A moment so small yet so powerful. That gesture wasn't in the script. It was something Reiner chose to do right there, in the moment. From then on, everything changed. Mike stopped seeing Archie as an enemy to destroy and started seeing him as a broken man, molded by fear he never asked for. The yelling stayed, sure, but it carried new weight. The hate turned into pain, the pain into empathy. Suddenly, their war of words felt human, not just political.
But the biggest truth about Carroll O'Connor, the one Rob Reiner realized far too late, came after the camera stopped rolling. When All in the Family ended in 1979, O'Connor walked away carrying Archie Bunker like a ghost he couldn't shake off. The public refused to separate the actor from the role. Some wrote letters accusing him of being racist, while others praised Archie as some kind of hero. It tore both extremes wide open, and O'Connor was caught in the middle. Reiner watched this unfold quietly, and for the first time, he saw how unfair it all was. He remembered that night in the storeroom, the night he learned that Archie's prejudice wasn't power, it was pain. Reiner knew O'Connor had dissected that darkness piece by piece, just to show how it was passed down through generations. Off camera, O'Connor couldn't have been more different, reserved, thoughtful, more comfortable with a book in his hands than a crowd at his feet. In interviews, Carroll O'Connor peeled back Archie Bunker's mask and exposed the pain underneath. He described Archie as a man who never smiled and never had anything kind to say, explaining that this bitterness wasn't a choice, it was something inherited, like a sickness that runs through generations. He wasn't making excuses, he was giving an explanation, and that understanding changed Rob Reiner forever. As Reiner stepped fully into his directing career, O'Connor's influence was written all over his work. Stand By Me dug deep into how childhood pain lingers like a shadow that never leaves. A Few Good Men ripped into how blind obedience to authority gets drilled into people long before they learn what's right or wrong. Later, Reiner admitted that O'Connor had taught him one of the most important lessons of his life. You don't lecture the audience into reflection. You let the characters tell the truth, and the judgment comes on its own. Powerful stuff. And despite all the gossip about tension between them, Reiner set the record straight once and for all. We didn't fight off camera, he said. We had enormous affection for each other.
Their bond wasn't loud or flashy. They didn't chase headlines or show up arm in arm at every event. Their bond lived quietly, built on respect and trust that ran deeper than words. When Carroll O'Connor passed away in 2001, Reiner didn't rush to give interviews or tell stories. He stayed silent, believing that their work already said everything that needed to be said. But as time went on, that silence began to feel heavy. With age and reflection, Reiner realized that by staying quiet, he'd let people misunderstand their truth, and that's something he could no longer live with. Now, at 78, Rob Reiner finally speaks openly about Carroll O'Connor and the man behind Archie Bunker. Now, without the weight of defensiveness, nostalgia, or performance, Rob Reiner doesn't feel the need to protect myths anymore. No more polishing legacies or softening truths that once felt too heavy to say out loud. Time has done what interviews never could. It's stripped everything bare, leaving only clarity. What's left is simple but powerful, a quiet responsibility to finally speak the truth that stayed buried for decades. Reiner has come to understand something profound. Carroll O'Connor devoted his entire life to one of the hardest, most dangerous challenges an actor can ever take on, embodying hatred so truthfully that no one could ever mistake it for virtue. And he did it knowing full well what it might cost him. O'Connor realized that plenty of viewers would cheer Archie Bunker instead of questioning him, and that others would confuse the character with the man himself. But he carried that risk on his back anyway, believing that showing ugliness honestly mattered more than being liked. "He was one of the kindest men I ever met," Reiner said, his voice steady but heavy. "People thought maybe Archie lived inside him. He didn't." Those words hit like a lifetime in one sentence. Reiner had spent years watching audiences either laugh with Archie's cruelty or attack O'Connor personally, not realizing the emotional toll behind the performance. And through it all, O'Connor never defended himself. He didn't step in to explain Archie, didn't rush to clear his name, didn't chase headlines to correct the misunderstanding. He trusted that over time, the truth would reveal itself through the work. And now, decades later, Reiner finally sees O'Connor's silence wasn't weakness, it was strength, wrapped in quiet dignity. Only now does Rob Reiner truly understand how lonely Carroll O'Connor's choice really was. To be hated, praised, or completely misunderstood, and to carry all of that in silence for the sake of the story. Looking back, Reiner admits that his real fear on the All in the Family set was never about the shouting matches or creative clashes. It was something deeper. He was terrified of failing O'Connor's standard. Every pause, every bit of silence, every off-script moment was like an invisible test hanging in the air. Was it honest or was it easy? That was the question O'Connor forced him to face again and again. What once felt like suffocating pressure, Reiner now sees for what it truly was, pure mentorship. O'Connor wasn't trying to dominate or demand loyalty. He was pushing for truth. Real, unpolished truth that cut through the noise and hit where it hurt. And when Reiner finally put it all into words, his realization was as simple as it was devastating. O'Connor carried America's ugliest character so others wouldn't have to. He absorbed all that hatred, confusion, and moral tension, but he never became the man he was playing. That's the difference between acting and sacrifice. So what about you? Do you think Carroll O'Connor was misunderstood or perfectly understood, just too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story opened your eyes or hit you with something real, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment for more untold truths behind television's most powerful and controversial legends.